Rebecca, I want to ask you, you have written a book. It's called The Mind-Body Problem. And this was written many years ago, and it is a novel. And I know it's not a philosophical argument. It's not necessarily about the mind-body problem in the sense that this podcast has been dedicated to. But I still believe that you have a lot of information that you can share with us with regards to the mind-body problem. So my first question to you is, how do you define this problem? And what is the mind-body problem to you? The philosophical one, of course.
Yes. So I ought to, little preamble is that I did my Ph.D. dissertation on mind-body problem. It was with my dissertation advisor was Tom Nagel of What It's Like to Be a Bat fame. And so when I came, much to my surprise, not to speak of the surprise of my philosophical colleagues, to write a novel, the last thing I ever expected to do, I kind of cheekily called it the mind-body problem, knowing full well, having been completely immersed in the philosophical discussion of this problem. But it wasn't just cheeky. I was up to something that I believed in. Okay, so I got my doctorate many decades ago. I came in from physics. I came in supported by National Science Foundation Fellowship because, the poor United States government fully believed I was going to do philosophy of physics.
Yes.
But I had become at a very early age, well, not at a very early age, in college, obsessed with the problem of how does matter do it. I was completely convinced that we are matter, and that seemed to me unquestionable. I had a certain experience. It was actually on a New York subway that the problem, what came years later to be called the hard problem of consciousness, just came crashing in. How does matter accomplish this thing? How does it wake up to the world? How is there this inner being? It was a funny sort of situation on a New York subway that caught, and I didn't at the time, I started reading what philosophers had to say about it, and nobody was taking consciousness seriously. I mean, it was a hokey term in those days, right? It really was. And then, when I got to graduate school and it went to Princeton, and I tended to do philosophical implications of special relativity. Time was also a huge problem, and it is a problem of consciousness too, the consciousness of time, which so constitutes our inner life. But how do you get it out of physics? But there was nobody I wanted to work with on that problem. But here was Tom Nagel, and he had, people were kind of making fun of him for having published What Is It Like to Be a Bat? And then I read it, and it was like, oh yes, perfectly stated. This is it. So I worked with him. Yeah. So maybe in that long, kind of slightly autobiographical vignette, there's a little bit of, what I take the problem to be, which is, we are composed of matter. I have no doubt of that. But and how do we do this? There's such a huge gap between a physical description and the subjective description that I am extremely interested in as a novelist. So when I called it the mind-body problem, that was part of it, that there is a way that one can get at all of these properties of us, of our brains, not through scientific language, but through, this inner kind of description which we try to extend to other people, and all quite awkwardly and incompletely. But this to me is the gap between the objective and the subjective. This is the mind-body problem. And I came to the conclusion that the real unknown is matter. Matter is what we don't know. We know it it's such a secondhand. And I could go in, great lengths about that, but that more or less was my entree into the mind-body problem.
When you think about the history of it all, and you think about Descartes when he sat down and he sort of looked around and realized that all that he has is mind. What comes to your mind? I mean, Thomas Nagel, obviously, he's very influential. We all read his paper. We've all read his paper, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? How do you define that experience? The what is it like? The qualitative, phenomenal experience that, so let's say, certain people like Daniel Dennett, who consider that to be an illusion, or certain people like maybe Philip Goff considered consciousness.
Excuse the giggle, but yes.
So there's so many people who have different and differing views on this. Do you think you have a monist view that this is all fundamentally matter, and yet we still don't understand matter? Or
we don't understand. Yeah, matter is well, you mentioned Descartes, so why don't I start with that? It's not an accident that the problem, as the modern problem, emerged in the 17th century, because that's when modern physics emerged, right? Galileo, who's a contemporary of Descartes, but pre Sir Isaac Newton, and so we start getting a handle on matter. Our notion of matter completely changes. Why? Because Galileo married empirical observation to mathematical description. We are so used to this. We take it for granted. What an extraordinary leap this was. We had Aristotle, with his teleological explanations, which was a very natural first attempt at explaining the nature of reality, because that's how we explain ourselves, right? That we have aims, we have goals, we're trying to get to it. Why not assume that the same matrix of explanation characterizes all of explanation? So, matter is trying to get to its rightful place. There are 4 different types of matter and, 4 different kinds of souls. And so you use that notion. And, and we've got, a very long time from the ancient Aristotle to Galileo, making not very much progress. And then this amazing thing, we can isolate certain aspects of experience and give them mathematical expression. Most importantly, the notion of motion, change of position over change of time, right? Delta t over delta t. What a leap this was, right? And we find, in Galileo, we find then the distinction between the real properties of matter, primary properties, meaning real, and the secondary ones that we dump into the mind. Those just are caused by the interaction between the real properties of matter and the mind. And what are the real properties? The mathematically expressible ones. And we've gotten incredibly far. I'm talking into this. Where are you? In Australia? Yes. And here I am, tip of US and Cape Cod. We're talking because of this incredible progress we've made of finding the laws that can be mathematically expressed. And what do they describe? Matter in motion. That is what we're describing, the behavior of matter in motion. Gone incredibly far. But what's matter, right? So this is, wait, now I completely lost I forgot the original question, but so what was the question?
Basically, we were trying to figure out what consciousness is. This podcast is called The Mind-Body Solution. So how do we figure this out?
What is consciousness? Yes. Consciousness is that which can't be expressed in purely mathematical language. That's it is the what is it like to be-ness, as Nagel had, had put it. It's the feeling, it's the memories, it's the stuff of our inner lives. It's what is it like to be a thing.
Yes.
There are certain things for which there are these facts. We certainly, all the most interesting facts about us are of this type. And it's very, very hard to grasp it in other people, much less members of other species. It's that stuff of experience, right? That is the thing that Descartes said we know most intimately.
When you think about the greatest philosophers that have come and gone talking about philosophy of mind, who do you think have provided us with the most insight when it comes to the mind and understanding it for what it is today amid this neuroscientific revolution? I mean, we're obviously looking at the brain as a fundamental core to the mind at this point. This dualistic view of the mind and the body being separate slowly seems to be changing. And now we're having new theories coming in that just seem to be bringing up consciousness as fundamental. You've got other theories where people are saying there's something like quantum consciousness. Do you think all of these have a lot of validity? And do you think it's reasonable to draw these conclusions based on what neuroscience has proven thus far?
I mean, I think neuroscience makes it more and more probable that we are nothing but our brains. I mean, it doesn't entail that conclusion. I mean, it's even dualism is still it's open. There's the science and then there's philosophy, right? How you interpret. And the science has not yet entailed the philosophical conclusion. I think almost all of them, except for illusionism, are compatible with all of the the evidence that we have. There could be a one-to-one correspondence between the organization in the brain and the qualia of experience, but it becomes less and less likely. A theory of natural selection makes it ever so much unlikely. I think it's really pretty probable. But the finer grades that we get down to in neuroscience, to me, doesn't make it any more probable. It's interesting. The complexity of the brain is infinitely interesting, but it doesn't. I don't think it makes the conclusion that we are, nothing but matter. But that matter is inherently mysterious. Where to me, it's quite amazing that we have managed to know as much as we have, and it's really thanks to the 17th century. This attempt is to say this great leap, metaphysical leap, of saying that math can get us to something, but it can't get us to everything. Why should math be able to get us to everything?
Yeah, and I know that the 17th century is a lot here. I mean, when you think about Descartes, Spinoza, a lot of the thinkers that you really admire and appreciate, what do you think he would say to a question like, what is consciousness? Or how do we solve the mind problem?
Descartes.
Spinoza. Let's go with Spinoza.
Oh, Spinoza. Spinoza doesn't have, I'm a great admirer of Spinoza, but it doesn't have as robust a notion of consciousness as does Descartes, which is surprising. I mean, I think that he is all about trying to dissolve dualities of every sort. He is a master monist, right? He's the ultimate monist. And so, the distinction between God and nature, no, that's dissolved. The distinction between between knowing and feeling is dissolved, right? Between the emotions and knowledge is dissolved. So he really tries to blow up dualities, and in some sense, the duality between mind and matter is resolved. That there is a sort of perhaps I'm reading into this, but as I say, and he doesn't concentrate on consciousness in the way that Descartes really does. In the second, it's really the first time when somebody is really concentrating on the what is it like to beingness, and all of the different modalities that this, he uses the word thinking. Oh, just a slight deviation. Consciousness meant something entirely different in the 17th century. It meant thinking together, men thinking together, by which I think they meant to include women as well, perhaps. And, it was Locke, I believe, who usurped the word consciousness and used it to cover all of those things that Descartes had enumerated with the verb to think, pense, or cogitere. What would he have said? I don't know. I think what would Spinoza? I think Spinoza would keep his view, which is that there is an ultimate reality which we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We know it incompletely. We can't possibly know it. We would need to have infinite minds to be able to know it completely. So, Spinoza has his own incompleteness theorem. And, but were we to know it, it would absorb all of these polarities, would contain all explanations. We don't, being finite, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the concepts for it. We have the concepts of thinking, and we have the concepts of, that go into physicality, and they don't seem, one can't seem to include the other, but that's because these are just two modalities of trying to think this infinite one substance for which we are inadequate. I think that's true.
Which do you say, when you think about mind versus matter, or mind or matter, are you a monist in that sense that you firmly believe that this is all either matter or mind, or do you have some sort of a preservation or reservation regarding this distinction?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So because as we've seen over time, certain scientists, let's say, for example, someone like Donald Hoffman, who is a physicist, he works with evolutionary biology, he is firmly within the neuroscience and physical fields, and yet after he does his calculations, he runs the mathematics, he draws this conclusion that we don't see reality for what it is at a 0% like probability rate. So he even remembers, he says he sat down the day he did the calculation and he says this, we'll never figure it out. But then he goes on further to make the theory that perhaps it's because consciousness is fundamental. And that's where the leap takes place, where someone jumps from one different conclusion and then has to make a new assumption. Do you think that is a probable outcome, or do you think that firmly this creation's mind is within the material world and it is matter that makes mind?
For whatever we mean by matter, the stuff out there, the stuff about which we have a very incomplete grasp.
Yes.
Yes, I am a materialist, right? I don't think that consciousness is the ultimate, we're able to access some properties of the matter that we are through introspection, through our knowing what it's like to be us. But there's way more to our minds than what's consciously accessible. I don't mean to be a Freudian here, although I don't rule this out or any of that stuff. But even language, that I'm putting my thoughts into language. I'm not thinking of all the rules that have to go into, syntax and vocabulary choice, all of this. It comes. It's all unconscious, right? It's if I had to consciously think out all of the rules, I would be even more inarticulate than I am. So you know, I don't have any access to what my mind is, all that my mind is doing.
Mhm.
It's a film. It's
Yeah.
the gauzy foam that's thrown up. But so I don't think consciousness,
Yeah.
the the thing that we can access. I mean, I think it's extremely important, obviously,
Mm.
and it certainly is extremely important in giving us insight into the mind-body problem, because we know that there are things that matter can do that we can't explain. This thing that we know it can do because we do it. We are in it. We know what it's like, consciousness, in a way that we don't know what matter is like.
Mm.
So it's extremely important, but I don't think it gives us the ultimate. So I'm not a panpsychist in that way, that I think that we've got a whole of what this ultimate thing is.
Mm.
I don't know if that's an answer to the question you were
I mean, it
asking.
does. Well, let's go. Well, let's move back a little. I mean, you giggled when I mentioned Dennett, and then you obviously said illusionism is not something you believe in. But let's touch on why, because if you think about some of the arguments that they present, they follow a very similar path. They talk about the fact that we don't introspect on everything we experience. There's a lot of flaws. We use heuristics. We have all these limited biological adaptations to the universe and to our environment in particular. So perhaps everything we do experience does not take place the way we think it does. I mean, there must be some sort of a temporality issue, because obviously light takes certain time to reach our retina, and then we have to convert that and then sort of experience what it's like to see red, for example. Why do you think that illusionism is such a flawed theory?
Oh, Descartes said it. He said it perfectly in the second meditation. Perhaps the demon it's a possibility. I can't rule it out. Perhaps he's deceiving me about everything. But that it seems to me that these things to be true, that I can't deny. And that is what I mean by consciousness. That's all, and it's so even if it's an illusion, it's a seeming to be, and if since those phenomenological descriptions are limited to first person,
Yeah.
present tense seemings, if you limit those, but where I draw the line is, I don't think that that's all that there is to the mind. There's
Yes.
so much more. And I don't think that consciousness and introspection gives us um, absolute or rigorous or
Mm.
um, reliable information about our own minds.
Yeah.
I'm a complete mystery to myself. I do things, I don't know why I do them. All these things. Perhaps a psychoanalyst could help me, perhaps not. I don't know, but I don't think I have complete access. But to my consciousness,
Yes.
even that I can interrogate, and it's infinitely rich. This is something that literature tells us. It's poetry tells us. A poet can explain to me things about my own mind that I hadn't noticed. So yeah, I don't think we have this perspicacious absolute knowledge about our own minds either.
Mm. So when you think about, because I know certain people like Keith Frankish, when he followed Dennett's work and he sort of added to it, what they tried to say was eventually that there is no essence. I mean, it's as if we're trying to make this Ian Vittel of consciousness, this new sort of substance that separates us from every other species. Um,
Oh,
do you agree with that?
oh gosh, no. I mean, animals have inner
Yeah.
lives that constantly. Oh, if I had my life to live over again, I would be perhaps an animal behaviorist. I've spent a lot of time in Africa watching the elephants.
Yes.
Oh my God, what a rich life they
You were
have.
in Uganda, right?
Hmm?
You were in Uganda at the time.
In Uganda, yes, 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 and then we back again to Tanzania,
Hmm.
and South Africa. So, oh, no, I love Africa and I love animals. So oh gosh, no, no, I mean, no doubt at all that there was something that is, you see such behavior, such complicated
Hmm.
psychological behavior. Uh, and of course, I mean, we're all part of the tree of life. I mean, we evolved, and out of these, I spent some time with, there was a friend of ours, Richard Wrangham, who he's a anthropologist, an evolutionary anthropologist, and he's been following the same troop of chimpanzees in Uganda. We've passed the 80 million year, for maybe 40 years by now, and we were privileged enough to go along with him, and he's so acclimated them. He was a student of Jane Goodall's, so acclimated them that we were very up close, and we couldn't. The male chimps were always off running or getting the best food, and the female chimps were carrying their babies, and I would get there last. And I came back from that first trip thinking, I finally understand my species a little better. I don't understand. Can I tell you, oh God, this is so the first thing I did when I came back was I went to the consciousness conference that David Chalmers was running in Arizona, and I was on a panel. I didn't know. I thought I'd just give my talk and then I'm done. But no, there's the panel, and I'm sitting between two alpha males, let's say, and and they disagreed very much with each other, and I was in between, and they're just sort of like talking over me and shaking their fists at each other, and people said I just sort of sat there with this sort of smile on my face, and what I was thinking was, I just saw this in Uganda with Richard's
Feels like Uganda all over again.
Yes, exactly. And it completely changed my view. It's made me much more patient toward my species. It's like, well, we can't help it. This is where we come from.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a fascinating thought, because when we look at chimpanzees, even bonobos in Congo, the way they behave, it's so human. When you watch a bonobo, it's amazing.
Have you seen them? Have you actually witnessed
them? In South Africa, and I know a lot of the chimpanzees that I see, you watch them, they're very human-like.
The expressions on their face.
Yeah, they express, they kiss, they hug. It's amazing to watch, because you can actually see that this is our cousin. This is legitimately an ancestral. We came down some sort of a similar path, and you can see that at some point we've diverged. So it's so difficult for someone to actually say that humans have this sort of eon vital essence, consciousness that they don't have.
No, of course they do. Oh my gosh, that's what makes But between them, and this, listening, yes, I can do any damn thing I want with this. Yeah. There's nothing that it's like to be. There's a lot of information contained in those pages, right? So there's information there, but there is not the what is it like to be-ness. Nope. And if there is, then we're all guilty of terrible exploitation of various objects in our world.
Nagel mentioned the what is it like. I'm a big fan of Nagel, and in my dissertation, one of my topics I discussed was moral luck. And I want to bring that at some point with you, because, of course, mattering and the moral philosophy is a big part of your work at this point. But before we get there, when Nagel spoke about this, what is it like feeling? It's obviously subjective, it's qualitative, and it's first-person phenomena. And so neuroscience, and I'm a doctor, and when we look at neuroscientific work, when we look at psychiatry, neurology, we're obviously looking at neural correlates of consciousness or experiences. Do you think this is a problem? Because technically, we're never going to be able to subjectively experience any of these things. So when we objectify these, do you think we might cause more harm at some point?
It's information. It's incredibly interesting, right? That there are these fine-grade correlations. It makes it more and more undeniable, or more and more probable, that we are nothing but our brain, as if we needed more of that. But yes, okay. And it's fascinating, and I suppose also we can get us to certain cures, hopefully, right? But if one thinks, I mean, conceivably, it could get us to, we could close the gap between the objective and the subjective. I mean, I think the subjective is objectively true. It's objectively true that I have a little itch on this cheek because my hair keeps brushing it. This is objectively true.
Yeah.
You could have inferred it by my keep swiping it away, but you don't know quite the qualities of this feeling. Anyway, but that's an objective fact about me, that I am a subject of experience, and therefore subject to this level of description. Maybe someday, I'll go into a brain machine and fMRI, and the neuroscientist will, look at me, aha, she claims to believe this, but she really believes the opposite, and this is all a pose, she's a phony, and they'll be able to read that out. Perhaps aspects of my mind, that I'm not even aware of. And then, yes, they will have done it. But we are so far from that. As you say, we just get these correlates. We're mapping. It's a kind of mapping. It's matter in motion. That's science can do.
Yeah.
And we get very far with it.
Do you think once we are able to do that, because of course, once we're able to figure out exactly how someone thinks, how the brain works, how it creates this experience, we're obviously going to then reach a point where we can do this artificially and create this.
I mean, we may be able to do it without knowing how it's
without even trying, and we might be able to. This might have happened already.
I mean, if in fact this is only matter working according to the laws by which matter works, about which we know a few, but we may create a machine there's nothing special about this wet stuff. It can be something, silicon can be chips, can be, it can be complicated enough so that yes, and then we will have an ethical problem.
Yeah, it can raise so many ethical dilemmas. Do you think? I often think about this because. Do you think this could be teleologically the way moving forward? Like maybe we were somehow, I don't think obviously humans were created to be the be all end all of species, but do you think perhaps this type of consciousness was destined to make that type of consciousness so that it could go further without us?
Well, perhaps, perhaps. I mean, it
might survive a lot more harsh territories. I mean, it's
yeah.
Point, it could go.
Yeah, I don't think we're destined to do it. I don't believe that we're destined for anything. I believe
I also don't believe in the meaning of life. I know you don't like that word, the meaning of life, or what are we destined to do?
Yeah, I think it's part of our hubris. But I think there's something truly fantastic about the fact that we are matter who are discovering the laws of matter, that because we're here, or some of the laws of matter, right? Because we're here, we're not here because God created us or chose us and he had a purpose or anything teleological but it happened. And what this means is that because we're here for as long as we're here, and I hope it's for a while, but who knows, that
I'm not as optimistic as you are.
Our species, no, I'm not terribly optimistic either, and I get less by the day, frankly. Yes, but that the universe is waking up to itself. It's the universe coming to know itself. That's sort of fantastic, and so there's something we're doing that actually matters. We're doing something for the universe. We're giving it self-knowledge. That's kind of amazing.
It is that sort of it's not spiritual, but that sort of thought of knowing we are the sensory organs of this universe. In a sense, we are taking in information. We're able to explain phenomena that we are part of, and we are fundamentally we grew out of it. I mean, often I remember my dissertation for my consciousness, I said, we are a conscious conglomerate of cells, organized by organelles, designed by DNA, manufactured by molecules, assembled by atoms, forged by fusion via stellar supernova. It's an amazing story when you
It's
think
an incredible story.
that this is how we got here. I mean, it's far better than any sort of a religious text or book that someone's written. It's an amazing story in its own right.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It is in the old sense of the word awesome. It is just truly,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's just awe-inspiring. It's such an amazing story, and yet we don't. Do you think that we as scientists or philosophers just struggle to tell the story as beautiful as it is, or that people are just listening to it in a way that's not the same way that we see it?
That's such a good question. And it's perhaps a little of both. I mean, it doesn't give the solace, comfort that the religious story does.
Yeah.
That, and I mean,
One yeah.
we're animals who know we're going to die, that we are, we have the animal terror of death. And here is this, there's a story that can calm us down. And I always wondered, I was brought up very religious, and I always wondered, well, why don't people just kill themselves? Heaven sounds so marvelous. Why are we all just committing suicide, right? Sounds so much better than this life. But anyway, so it's not, it's not a story that favors any one of us. Oh, we're being seen, but we are being seen by the universe. We are here for something. If we exist, then so it doesn't get us on the emotional level. You have to get this sort of out of yourself, grand, objective, awesome, Spinozistic view to have your heart race about this. I don't mean to disparage my species, and I think maybe we ought to tell the story better. So yes,
I think so. Yeah, I agree. I think it's the way we tell the story that matters more. I mean, nobody wants to just sit down and learn about DNA. People need to actually see what DNA does, because when you actually observe this, it's literally, it will change someone's mind when they watch how we get manufactured and made and assembled. It's such an intricately beautiful thing to watch. And today we have the technology to do that. And yet most people still don't believe DNA even exists or atoms exist. It's bizarre time.
Most Americans, I don't know, I don't remember what the percentage of Americans who doubt the theory of natural selection is, but it's phenomenally high.
I know.
It's all.
Look, in South Africa, it's no different. I'm pretty sure the majority of the population feel the same way, but it's still fascinating to see how people doubt things we can actively show them. With I mean, we're living in such strange times. People talk about flat Earth. People talk about ridiculous things that they seem to rationalize very well. And I think this is somewhere where you can come in. Why do you think we're able to rationalize such bizarre theories? Look, I don't want to offend any flat earthers out there, because obviously this is now touching on certain political issues. But when we talk about consciousness, we've got idealism, where consciousness is everything that there is. We've got panpsychism, where all matter is mind. You've got quantum consciousness, where there's these elements of consciousness we will never understand because we don't understand quantum physics. Do you think that we have these theories because of this longing to matter, and that sort of adds to this? Because that goes completely against what we seem to get from the data.
Well, there's one hidden premise that we haven't touched on yet. And it is, that whatever our current science is, it's kind of complete. I think both illusionists, is that the word one uses, or proponents of illusionism, or we used to call it yes. We used to call them eliminative materialists.
Yeah, I mean, and Paul Churchland, if you think about that, because they do a very similar thing with eliminative materialism. Yes.
Yeah. And reductive materialists,
yes.
Dualists, I would say, Cartesian dualists, if there are any still around, I don't know.
There's also the emergentists, so those who believe that as phenomena get sort of higher, sort of like water, like molecules separately sort of combine to form water, H2O. That's sort of an option.
Yeah, that, that somehow we've got the basic concepts that explain external reality, all of external reality. And we know, and that's, so whatever we have, let's generalize it to a theory. And I mean, Cartesian dualists, incredibly so, because I mean, to draw the conclusion that we are not matter, to be in a position to do that, we'd have to have a complete description of matter. Otherwise, it's, it can be lurking down there. And how can we ever draw that conclusion? And because of the very fact that we can't explain the emergence of matter would be enough reason to doubt that we have a complete description of matter. So you can't do it non-circularly. You couldn't draw the dualist conclusion non-circularly. I mean, there could be other reasons for drawing the dualist conclusion, like you've seen, you've had an experience of someone coming back from the dead, or something like that, or and you've seen a ghost or something, but that would be some empirical evidence for it, but not from the fact that we can't derive these properties from our current description of matter. And all of these things, I think, that's like we're jumping the gun here. We've I suppose, and why do we do that? We're arrogant, I think. And our science is so extremely powerful. It's awesome too, but we don't really even know how to reconcile relativity theory with quantum mechanics, so with, and these are our two most powerful theories, and they have deep irreconcilabilities. We know this is not the end of the physics story. There is so much. We don't have the major concepts that can absorb everything. Maybe we never will. We're just slightly smarter apes. It's amazing that we've done what we've done. We forget this. I think everybody should spend time in.
Forget that it's 1% of a DNA that changes us from being a sort of a chimp or a different great ape.
And it is something amazing we can do because we have self-reflection. This thing we can step outside of ourselves and analyze ourselves, and and that's really different from chimpanzees, I think.
Yes.
I mean, they've shown that chimpanzees have some kind of theory of mind, and they're not so far from us as we had thought, right? And then there with Deval, those experiences where the I guess it's a monkey learns a trick, and one of them gets cucumbers and one of them gets something much more tasty, and then the one who gets the cucumbers starts like throwing it, it's like goes on strike. It's unfair, so there's some sort of sense of self there, right? But what we have, in our self-reflection and in our ability for self-transcendence, just really get outside of ourselves and think, what does it all mean? Do I matter? All of this stuff that I'm very into at this point, is this, I think, this is kind of unique to us, but it's just, this is our niche that we filled. I don't know if we evolved for self-reflection or if it was just a, what do they call it? What was, Stephen Jay Gould's word for it, the thing that it's epiphenomenon of
epiphenomenalism. So
yeah, but the self-reflection. Oh God, what was that word? It's from architecture. the parts of the arch that was just there, and then they used it. I can't think of the word right now, but anyway, so it's just. But the self-reflection has a lot to do with what is it like to be, to be us, trying to justify our lives and all of this stuff that we do. I don't think chimps do this,
Yeah, no.
So there is something a little that we've evolved that's made us very, very much more complicated.
Look, I think because one of the main reasons why I started this podcast was to show how difficult the mind-body problem is, not just theoretically though, but practically, because it has so many other philosophical implications. Let's say we'll leave psychiatry, etc., out for now, but the question of free will. I know this fascinates you, and it definitely fascinates me. I mean, what do we do about this? I mean, we know that certain things take place in different times. I mean, if the sun had to disappear, we'd only notice 8 minutes later that it's gone. So this naive realism that we think reality occurs the way it does. What are your thoughts on free will, and how should we approach this question?
Some writer, I think it was Isaac Bashevis Singer, had said, I believe in free will. I have no choice.
Yeah.
And it's very witty, right? But I think it's very true, right? I mean, it's extremely difficult to reconcile with what we know. That if there is an explanation for everything we do, then how are we free? And if there's not an explanation for everything we do, if it's just sort of this arbitrary thing, it just hits us, there's nothing in our former history that would explain this. Well, where's our agency, and how can we be free? So whether there is an explanation for everything we do or there isn't, how can we be free agents? That seems to be a paradox, and I don't know my way out of it. No, that's why it's a very good philosophical problem. But there can be no human life without our taking responsibility for our actions, being accountable to ourselves and to one another. We can't account for it, but this accountability, but it has to be part of our lives, or there is no human life. But there are so many things like that.
Yes.
I mean, David Hume showed us we can't account for the uniformity of nature, that just because things have always, so the very presumption that grounds all of our empirical knowledge, we can't account for that. There is no way to account for that. But there's no science, there's nothing, there's no common sense or science or anything. If we don't presume it. Logic too, we can't. Poor Descartes tried to go on and justify logic, prove the validity of logic, of course, circularly, because how can you not presume logic in the proof of logic? We are caught, right? There are a lot of things we have to presume, being humans, without being able to account for them. Mm-hmm. And I kind of think, free will is one of them. Consciousness is another. Know our limits. Maybe the mere fact that human life can't be pursued without presuming these things, deductive logic, inductive logic, mm-hmm. some kind of agency for which we're responsible, is itself a kind of justification. It's feeble.
Do you label yourself into any sort of category when it comes to free will? Are you compatibilist? Do you actually find yourself in any sort of a label in that sense?
No, I'm committed to it without being able to account for it, as I am for so many things. I
find the same things for me. I often say I'm ontologically agnostic. I just have no idea. But epistemologically, I can tell you what a lot of things I think are not true, is what I often say.
I think I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Yes.
When it comes to free will, I mean, the reason why I brought this up was also because, I mean, of course, you've worked at Nagel and he wrote about moral luck. And I mean, and that comes into a very important aspect here. I mean, a lot of people are not put into this planet the same way, and therefore their existence is determined by pre-existing factors that are far beyond their control. And what does that mean, and how does it affect them? And he spoke about different types of luck. And then you've got new people like Dirk Peerboom, Greg Caruso, who also discuss this accountability, this longing for punishment and blameworthiness and praiseworthiness. Should we be doing this? Is this how we should be living life? Or should we eliminate this sort of view and view things as we just shouldn't be held accountable technically because of the fact that there are these factors like luck that predispose us to, let's say, being more likely to murder someone one day or to commit a crime. We're in that. I know that's a lot. That's a mouthful.
I don't know, can we believe in accountability without being also assigning blame? That's the view I like, and that actually is a kind of Spinozist view. Spinoza was a very, very strict determinist, but it's yeah, that is, that
it's a tough one.
Yes, it is. It is a tough one. I don't know if I don't know, holding ourselves accountable is very important to the moral life.
I know you view moral realism as something important. I know you take this to be something very important to you.
Yeah, it's not that I think that there are these extra facts.
Yes.
Moral facts, coming down from Plato's heaven. No, it's not that kind of, but that, I think, again, I go back, I think that for complicated reasons, really going back to physics, I would say, and entropy, we are we are creatures of matter who take our own mattering very seriously. It's possible to pursue a life without thinking that you matter. I mean, and in fact, what clinical depression are people who, they don't matter. Nothing they can do. Others matter, but they don't. So it's just part of mental health, well-being, all of these things, to have some sense of mattering, which should quickly get us to, well, if we're going to embrace this for ourselves, we have to embrace it certainly for all members of at least of our species, if not other species as well, which I would also extend it to. But that this is if we can't get along without this presumption, neither certainly can any other Homo sapiens. So it's that sense of, that's the kind of moral realism, and just to acknowledge the equal mattering of everybody in our species would get us very far to a better world. If we really believe that, we would get rid of classes and races and sexes and, just all sorts of those isms that say some people matter more than others. We would get very, very far without, we'd get rid of all of the more noxious forms of tribalism and such. That's a good enough morality for me.
Yeah. A lot of people think that obviously if you have to, in order to have a strong sense of moral grounding, you need some sort of a spirituality or a religious belief. And of course, as a secular humanist, you disagree with that, and firmly. I disagree with that personally because I'm very similar in that sense. How do you ground your views in your moral realism? Where do you find that longing to matter?
Well, I think it's just a fact that we do long to matter. And I think we can trace it back to natural selection. Everything struggles to, actually, Spinoza, again, he had this notion of conatas, the drive to persist and to flourish in one's own being, that he thought everything had. Well, certainly every living thing has this, right? And it goes back to entropy. We're all going toward dissolution, death, decay, all of that. That's what physical systems do. And we have to devote an incredible amount of energy. We have to be devoted to to really pouring in the energy to, for a while, delay the inevitable, right? And so to be a living thing is to be fighting constantly against entropy by gathering the energy that we can, right? And that's how natural selection works, that's how ultimately, some people from the religious right, think that there is, in fact, an incompatibility between the theory of natural selection and the theory of entropy. And no, exactly. You can actually derive, as Schrodinger, the great physicist, showed in What is Life, that no, it really is entailed by entropy. Anyway, so we have to be devoted to, of all the things in the universe, the one thing that we happen to be. That's the one who we fighting and getting the energy to delay the inevitable. Everything, the grass struggling up through the sidewalk, to us, we are struggling for the energy to offset entropy. But we, with this incredible, complicated brain that has self-reflection and self-transcendence, can step outside of ourselves and say, who am I? Why am I so devoted to the flourishing of all the things in the universe? Why should I care so much about this? And then we turn from Homo sapiens into what I call Homo justificans. We are the ones who want to justify our existence in all sorts of ways. We have various ways to do it. But we're never going to, as long as we're going to persist in our lives and to pursue it. And as Nagel says in his article in The Absurd, well, who else's life am I going to pursue if not my own? A very deep joke, right? Then as long as we're going to do this, and we get terribly outraged when people don't recognize our right to pursue our lives, to flourish. Well, any justification I'm going to be able to offer for why others should recognize my right to do this is got to be generalized to at least every other member of my species, if not other species as well. I mean, I think that too. Yes. That's how I ground it. That's how I ground it. And using nothing but ultimately entropy.
Do you ever get
entropy, what that means for living systems?
Do you ever get this nihilistic feeling? Like it's almost as if this universe went through 13.8 billion years of developing, 4.8 billion years of this planet, and then after a couple billion years, we evolve. I mean, we get the self-awareness. We know in a few years it's going to all go away. It's almost like a huge joke's been played on us. I mean, we were made self-aware, and now suddenly everything is going to go away. Does that nihilistic thought ever come to you? Do you ever have this thought like, I mean, it's a bit bleak?
Yeah. Life is but a passing shadow. A poor player spreads his hour upon the stage, and then
we're not even the main characters in this game. We're just a part of this play. That's random.
I mean, I think it occurs to every member of our species. It certainly occurred to Shakespeare, and to the Greeks as well. That is what it is to have this complicated brain that can step outside itself. And yes, I think that's good, and I think it's good for the soul, to do this kind of thing. But then the other thing that we spoke about. Wow! But while we're here. What a story, right? Maybe, and for me, I mean, we all have our own ways. We Homo justificans, we all have our own ways of trying to justify. But to me, maybe I can add a little letter to the story, one little thing, participate in it. Cool. That's cool.
And you get a chance to sort of like imprint yourself into this story somehow.
That will go out. We'll go out with our son. We will go out or maybe much, much sooner, given, the way we're behaving. But yeah, I don't know. Is it bleak? It's both bleak. It's both bleak and wonderful.
It is. It's almost this dichotomy. It's like it's both. It's awesome, awe-inspiring, and yet still very, very concerning and confusing. Like why?
Exactly. I think that's a thoughtful place to be. You know, exactly what you
Yeah.
described. Confused, baffled,
And
and
you grew up very obviously Orthodox Jewish
yes,
background, and
yes.
I mean at some point you obviously you spent a lot of time in the library, you were reading a lot of books, and they obviously allowed you to read them. When you became an atheist and you came out, do you still label yourself as an atheist, or do you have some sort of a different way of describing your beliefs, your personal
I
beliefs?
like secular humanist because it's much more
Yeah.
positive. It tells, right? I believe, I believe we humans are
Mm.
worth preserving, and that there are ways that we ought to treat one another, and that it's not founded on anything supernatural, and that we can reason our way there, and
Yeah.
it would be a good thing to do. Yeah.
I find even the question isn't a great one. I think that I like to say I'm agnostic regarding the origins of the universe, but I'm very much atheist to the stories human beings have told over time. You know?
Yeah, I like that. I like that very much. Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, it's again, as if we never can say, I don't know. I've got no idea.
People
I'm
just
confused.
want these classifications and these groupings, and you want to have this tribal group of people who call themselves atheists as well, and you want these people who say, and I also don't really like that.
I
See,
don't either. I mean, at first I embraced it because very enthusiastically,
me
because it
too.
was, I had to live a difficult, I was sort of, uh, for family reasons, people thought I was Orthodox,
Mm.
and I was, I was completely not in my head, but out of respect for my family, especially for my parents when they were still alive, I lived that way. It meant so much to them.
Mhm.
And it meant so much that they could eat at my house, and all these things that, anyway. But when I could finally, say no, 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 I don't believe in any of this, was so it was so, yeah, liberating, and it felt like integrity,
Mm.
because there were so many times when I just couldn't answer what I really thought because it would discomfort people that I loved.
Yeah.
So yes, so I was like, and I got like every atheist award, the Richard Dawkins Award, that this award. I think they were also eager for a woman because it's
Yes.
a very male dominated group, like most of the groups that I've been associated with, including Orthodox Judaism. But
I mean, it must have been an intriguing and fascinating journey. I mean, because you obviously didn't know coming up Orthodox that you'd even be able to study, you wouldn't be able to do the things you wanted to do, because this affects your life directly in so many ways.
yes, no, I mean, the public library was just my savior.
Yeah.
And my parents were very liberal about, what I could read. I mean, as long as, so for example, when I was 13, I brought home a book from the library by Bertrand Russell, a very important figure in
Yeah.
my development. And but it was called Why I'm Not a Christian. My parents looked at it as like, yeah, fine, we don't want you to be Christian, you're Jewish, right?
Yeah, no, I've had a very similar experience because when in my half of my family comes from Islamic background, the other half from a Hindu background, and I've got a lot of Christian family as well. And wherever I went, whether it was a temple, a mosque, a church, whenever I asked questions, I was always shunned and felt like the outsider. So for me as well, coming out as that kid who just I firmly just disagreed with all of this, it is that liberating that experience. It's like coming out of the closet sort of thing. You're like, I want to be proud of it, and you come out as the strong atheist. You want to
Yes,
fight
yes.
that battle. So I completely get why you're winning these atheist awards at the time. But over time, it tends to fade, and you tend to slowly become a little more tolerant of other people's views. But at the time, I remember the anger and the feeling I had. I mean, it was this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I had put it off for so many decades, and so it was like really bursting. Yes. Unfortunately, my husband just signaled me, and I'm using his camera, and now he needs it.
Oh, Stephen, for
we fight over the good camera for. Yes.
Do you want to conclude, and then we can perhaps one day schedule around to?
Yes, because we're really getting to the really good stuff.
Yeah, because there's still so much I have to ask, and there's so much we need to get into. And Stephen, you're invited as well at some point to give us your views on the mind-body problem. Just as
yes. Yeah. Well, his views are very good. When I read how the mind works, I was waiting to see how he would deal with this problem. And I tell you, in all honesty, as much as I know my own mind, which maybe, as I say, is not completely, we would not be married. Had I not loved the one paragraph in which he addressed this.
I know there was you guys have a really nerdy love story. There was he mentioned you in one of his footnotes, was it? I think in one of his books.
Okay, it was actually in the text. He quoted my use of a irregular verb. I had written had stridden rather than had strided in one of my most obscure books that nobody other than my editor read, and I'm not even sure about my editor. And then I see him quoting this in one of his books, and I thought, because I saw my name, he was actually arguing in the pages of the New York Review of Books, with Stephen Jay Gould. So I looked up in the index Gould, and there's not Gould, there's Goldstein, Rebecca, but it's a terribly common name, and I thought, oh, it's another one. I have nothing to do with irregular verbs. Sure enough, yes. Imagine. And so, yes, we are held together by this irregular verb. Yes,
it's an amazing. I mean, both of you are truly inspiring. I have like a whole shelf with both your books side by side in my book. So I look forward to us chatting again. And Stephen, you can use this. You can use the camera for now, but next time.
No, I would love to talk to you again. This has been for me a very enjoyable conversation.